Thank you, thank you. How is everybody tonight? Are you enjoying this? Could we please put our hands together and thank the folks from the chamber and all the volunteers who put this event together? Yeah. I think it's just terrific. And I've got to adjust the microphone because I'm a little taller than Debbie, I think. You don't mind my playing with your equipment, do you? I always worry when people start messing with my equipment. I know I'm in trouble. Yeah. You know, the first question everybody asks me is, do you miss being the troubleshooter? Do you miss TV? I say, I don't miss TV a bit, but I still feel like I'm the troubleshooter. Because since we came into office, people from throughout the region are still writing us, asking us to help solve problems. It's just incredible. So there are some things that just never change. Never change. But that's not the reason I'm here tonight. I was asked to come here and talk about that big transition, making the step from one profession to another. And I've got to tell you, it's never really seamless, but it's all part of the journey, isn't it? Right? I see some heads nodding. Because really, none of us is cut out to keep doing the same thing over and over and over all of our lives. The days of collecting a gold watch at the end of a career at one company, I think, are far behind us. It's something that our generation here is not expecting to do. And we shouldn't, right? Here's Casey Gwynn sitting down front. He says, just give me something new to do every single day and I'll be happy. Because by and large, I think, Casey and myself and many of the people here have short attention spans. Our attention spans are just way too short to have to do the same thing over and over. Am I right? Hello? Am I right? It's true. Don't go to sleep back there. All you people sitting in the dark, you don't have to be afraid. You can move up. This says a lot about what kind of students we were, right? In grammar school and high school. It's like there are some people who just sit right down in the front row, like Casey here, and other people who are way in the back so they can slip out unnoticed. But we will notice you. We are taking names tonight. Anyway, thank you for having me here. I do appreciate it. And it has been a remarkable journey. I know Charlene Zettel talked about how do you go from just being a mom to a hygienist to, being in the state assembly and having to deal with jerk reporters like Marti Emerald. One day, the Charlene and Marti story will come out. In 2000, when our electric rates were going through the flippin' roof, we were up in Sacramento working our legislative delegation, trying to get them to vote for a cap to freeze the electric rates so that small businesses and people on fixed incomes could afford to pay their electric bills. And Charlene and I got involved in a little, philosophical discussion on the floor of the assembly, let's put it that way. And it's taken a while, but I think both of us have come together and we can respect each other more now. Hey, Charlene, where are you? You're not here listening to this. But that becomes a remarkable journey. And what is it that compels a person to go from, that stay-at-home mom or the 9-to-5 job to rolling up your sleeves and deciding that you're going to get in the middle of the fight? You're going to get in the middle of the fray, where you're going to cast aside everything you have known and step outside your comfort level to take a step into what you don't know. It could either be off of a cliff, or it could be stepping onto ground that feels different, but it's exciting and you've taken the right step. And for everybody, the journey is different. But for everybody, there's one thing that's the same. And I think FDR put it best back in the 40s when we were entering into World War II. I don't know how many other people are watching the Pacific. I'm just riveted to it because my father fought in the Pacific during World War II. But FDR said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And the people who are willing to step out of their comfort zone, to take a chance, to do something different, and fight the good fight, not knowing how it's going to end up, are people who've decided they're not going to be afraid. They're not going to have their lives dictated, driven, and defined by fear. And I know each and every person here can relate to it. Here I go, I'm going to mention Casey again, because he's front and center, you know? He's one of those guys that's front and center. I serve on his task force over at the Family Justice Center. And you know the people who are making the biggest difference at the Family Justice Center? Yes, the Casey Gwynns of the world who helped to create the programs, find funding, the police department with people who are managing the program, the social workers, the prosecutors, all of those people make it happen day to day. But the people who have made the biggest difference with that program locally and have created a model that is now the model for the world are the people who have come in as victims of abuse, who have committed themselves to turning their lives around, not defining themselves as victims. They're people who have decided, enough is enough, I deserve better than this, I have a greater mission now based upon the pain I've had, the fear I've experienced, and I'm not going to go back there again. And that's what's happened in that example, and that's what's happened with so many of the people I know in this room. Maybe it was because you had a career, you had kids, they've grown up, they're out of their own lives. Or maybe you had a job, a career that disappeared in not just this bad economy, or maybe in the early 90s, or maybe in the early 80s. And you realized you had to make a change. You had to, as the headline that I had taped to my computer console for so many years at Channel 10 said, you had to adapt or die. Right? You had to adapt or die. We all share that in common, that somewhere along the way the axis turned, they slipped a little bit. And it changed our perspective on the world. It changed our perspective on ourselves. And I can speak for myself that that's kind of what happened with me. Growing up in rural Oregon, a little town called Gresham, foot of Mount Hood, a lot of wind there. You know, at the time, we just cursed the wind walking to school. Now they're making money off wind in the Columbia River Gorge. If you haven't been there, you got to go. It's beautiful country and a lot of windsurfing and all that kind of cool stuff. But I grew up in this little rural area where, you know, most people did their high school and then, you know, they got a job in a store. And as my mother said, they got a job maybe at the phone company if they're lucky, because if you can score a job at the phone company, you got it made, right? And I did for a while. I was a directory assistance operator for Pacific Northwest Bell. Number, please. One moment, please. And that got real boring real fast. You know, when your whole world is sort of the length of that little cord that you got plugged into the little, you know, the unit there. That's it. That's all they wrote. That's where you're going. But so, you know, we weren't taught to really expect a lot. Just stay alive, basically, and then get a job and get married and kind of struggle along. But that was the American way. In fact, hey, if you could pull down $1,000 a month, man, you were rich, right? I don't know if anybody else is as old as I am and can relate to it, but I was a song and dance kid. So I wasn't content to stay in Gresham, Oregon. In fact, some college recruiters came out to Gresham, Oregon and watched me rehearsing for a play and said, come on to our school. You're going to be terrific. You'll be a real star. And so I did. I actually accepted a full-ride scholarship at USIU. Anybody remember USIU here in San Diego? Yeah, we pulled in and realized it was really USIOU. They were so in debt and really didn't have a whole. So here I was basically back in Gresham, you know, doing it, you know, with no bucks. But it was so much fun. It was interesting. But those theater people, they were crazy. They scared me. I lasted 1 year. I blew out a knee dancing and caught a ride with a professor who had a cabin, would you believe, in Gresham, Oregon. So off I went back to Portland, and I said to myself, okay, let's regroup here and see what you really want to do, because who wants to live with all these crazy people? And then I wind up in the media. That's kind of zany. And now politics. I should have stuck with the theater. It would have been a lot more tame. But wound up back in Portland, recovering on the knee, and checked into Portland State University and just started, you know, schnoring around the different classes and discovered the newspaper at the university, and had an opportunity to do some writing, and I thought that was pretty cool. And at this point, you know, we're still in Vietnam, and I have an opportunity to write about the campus and things going on campus related to anti-war stuff. And so I felt like I was really kind of in the middle of something special. But I wasn't getting terrifically good grades, and I was really broke. I had to get a job. And schlepping eggs and bacon in the morning, you know, didn't really pay much, although, you know, I could pack a lunch or something from there and at least eat a couple of times a day. That's when I saw an ad in the newspaper for cab drivers, and I became a cab driver. And I eventually dropped out of college and wound up driving cab full time. But you know, it's not as dreary as that may sound. Actually, it was a very cool job. It was the first time I ever got paid to just talk. Because you know cab drivers, right? They're just going on and on and on about anything. You know, you give them and nobody's really listening. So, you know, it was kind of cool. And then I had an opportunity to actually dispatch taxis. Now that's power. And it was also my introduction to broadcasting. How's that? Because people on the other end would say, oh, that lady has a very nice voice. She ought to be in radio. And eventually, I met some people who said, you do have a good voice. And I had an opportunity to do a little freelancing for the Associated Press radio network. This is back in the late 70s. And eventually wound up in Washington, D.C. I knew I couldn't drive a cab there because I didn't know my way around town, but I could find my way from Georgetown to Capitol Hill and other departments of the federal government, and so I signed on as a freelancer. Now, and this is where I realized that we really do have the ability to take a situation that really is sort of like a dead-end situation, because look, how long are you going to be able to keep up a career when you're only paid $25 a story, and you're sitting in congressional hearings all day, so you get to sell one story a day? You're not going to get very far that way. So I decided to introduce myself to the congressional delegation from the Pacific Northwest. Every representative and U.S. senator from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and then Northern California. And then I also introduced myself around to various departments, lobbying organizations, trade organizations, as the Emerald News. I was the Emerald News Service. And it's funny, you know, 20 years after that, my father and mother were still getting mail for the Emerald News Service at our house in Oregon. My father always felt very proud when he picked up a piece of mail from some congressional office, you know, and so this tells you how old some of the Rolodexes are, right? They don't change them out. Oh, Emerald News Service. Well, that was 20 years ago. Well, so what? Big deal. Just send it anyway. But I became the Emerald News Service. And I had a routine. I would cover my hearings, get actualities, get them on the feed to the Pacific time zone. And then also on Sunday mornings, I'd ride my little moped over to CBS Studios on M Street. Okay, now, you know, we got to think outside the box sometimes. We got to take a chance, be willing to hear no, or actually be kicked off private property. But I just, you know, what are they going to do? What's the worst, right? Say no.